Hello everyone, this is Ashish, and today we are going to discuss about internal developer portal using Azure Deployment Environment. So Azure Deployment Environment is a feature of Azure where you can have a kind of internal developer portal by using a platform engineering approach, so that your developers can have their environment deployed as soon as they need, and in a most effective way, or I would say, like, in the most developer friendly way. So let's discuss about what this approach is first, and then we will get into the resource and how you can deploy it, and what are the different things you should consider in terms of Azure terms. So let me share my screen here. Okay, so okay, let me hide myself. And so here is the official image from the Microsoft documentation. And what it says here is that you have your infrastructure team. So you can call it like platform engineers, you can call it like developer platform engineers, or developer platform team, or dev infra team. So these guys who are mostly kind of responsible for managing the infrastructure in your organization, and they continuously develop their infrastructure as code. And what often happens that they need a good framework so that these infrastructure templates can be used effectively by developers without having to know much about the infrastructure as code languages, to say. Yeah, it is good to have some understanding of it, but developer always want to have their environment as soon as possible, and they want to have least interface where they have to get into the infrastructure as code development practices. So that's where your infrastructure team can develop these templates, and they can kind of combine the subscriptions, identity, permissions, so they can map these templates with all these permissions control, so that when developer deploy these template are automatically deployed to a particular subscriptions where they supposed to be deployed. First of all, that's something that developer should not worry about, which subscription I should choose, what permissions I need, what identities I should use. So those kind of things a developer need not to worry about. And then developer can use any of the interfaces. When we are talking about Azure deployment environment, you have a dev portal, so developer portal, a web application interface where a developer can go in a very typical traditional way. They can choose their application stack and they can deploy that resource over there, or they can use CLI. So CLI, in terms of Azure deployment environment, the CLI is Azure Developer CLI. So Azure Developer CLI, if you have not watched my session, I have already covered how Azure Developer CLI kind of make a developer life easy in terms of deploying resources for their application needs. So Azure Deployment Environment works very very smoothly with Azure Developer CLI. And then they can also use CI/CD pipelines, configure their own CI/CD pipeline, which will automatically deploy their resources in the respective environment with the proper guardrails like subscription, identity, permission, and all those stuff. And they just have to deploy those resources. Maybe they want to deploy a sandbox environment, maybe they want to deploy a dev test staging production, a typical environment where they can do development, where they can do the testing, or they can have a staging, or they want to deploy a production environment by themselves without to worry about or depending upon any infrastructure team. So that's the platform engineering mindset that we are talking about, and that's what Azure Deployment Environment facilitates to you. So we will discuss about how to develop or how to deploy or how to set up this thing using Terraform. So when Microsoft introduced this Azure Deployment Environment, initially it was possible with Bicep. Recently, they came up with the idea of extensibility model. So in this extensibility model, if you see, this is the new image of the same framework. So you can see you have platform engineers. Previously, they were calling like dev infrastructure engineers or developer infrastructure developer or something like that. Now here the terms being called platform engineers, that's the term these days. A lot of people are using platform engineering, platform internal developer platform or something like that. So these are the guys who are developing these infrastructure template. Now these infrastructure template need not to be only ARM template or Bicep from Azure. So they can also be infrastructure as code developed or or defined using Terraform, using Pulumi, or all the different infrastructure as code platforms being supported by extensibility model. And we will get into this in a bit, what exactly extensibility model is, how do you use it and all. So before we first get into this stuff, and then we will talk about this extensibility model in the Terraform itself, so that you can see how it works. And then as you can see here, you have build, code, debug, and there you can use portal, you can use CLI, you can use CI/CD pipelines, and you can deploy your either more of like a platform permanent environment like dev, test, prod, or you can even have a sandbox environment. So we will deploy a sandbox environment for a very simple application, and we will get into that in a bit. So this is the whole thing that we are going to discuss about today. Let me open my Visual Studio. Okay, so here I have two folders. If you can see, I have deployment environment, I have environment definitions. So we'll get into this environment definition in a bit, how we are using it and what exactly there. But let's first talk about deployment environment. So deployment environment consists of the Terraform file, which is deploying the whole setup for us. So the setup that we just talked about, let me just again minimize this guy. Yeah, so this whole setup we are talking about will be done by this Terraform code that we are looking into. So first let me initiate the deployment, and I just did destroy it during testing. So let me clear this. And if I do a Terraform plan, just to show you how many resources will be deployed, and then we will get into this code as well, like what are the things happening while the deployment will happen. It will take some time, like maybe 5 minutes, and during that time we will be discussing about this infrastructure, this template. So as you can see, we have like 11 resources will be created in the Azure, and we will talk about what those 11 resources will be. So before that, let me open the portal. Yeah, and here if I search Azure Deployment Environment, you will see I don't have any environment as of now. So there is nothing here. So there is essentially nothing. Now let's go ahead and deploy this Terraform code. So Terraform apply will deploy all the resources here. It will ask me to confirm. So let's just wait for some time. It will validate, and then yeah, so it will ask to complete, and then now it will start to deploy resources in Azure. Now let's go ahead and figure out what resources are being created. So as you can see, first of all, it will create the resource group, and then it will continue. So let's talk about these things here. So as you can see, we have a couple of data resources here. So we are accessing certain role definitions from Azure to assign them on appropriate level, and we will discussing about what those role permissions are. Let's jump to the resources block. So here we have first resource, which is the environment resource group. So here resource group, as you know, in Azure everything resides in a resource group. So I have to first create a resource group, and then and then after resource group we are deploying dev center. So dev center is not really a very new topic. I mean, it's a kind of if you are familiar with dev test lab, this dev center is essentially the same kind of resource. So Microsoft has developed this framework of deployment environment based on this dev center concept itself. So first it creates a dev center resource. In the dev center resource, we attach something called catalog. Now this catalog, if you see, is referencing to a in GitHub repository. And this GitHub repository is nothing but the same repository that where our code is. The only thing is that it goes to this folder, chapter 9, environment definition, and that's exactly the other folder is, so environment definition. And if you expand it, you can see there are a couple of environment definitions, for example ARM template, bicep template, Terraform template. So as we discussed, Azure Deployment Environment supports all these three different infrastructure as code tooling. So ARM template, traditional ARM template, if you remember JSON files, those are the ARM template. It supports that. So if you go there, you have these ARM templates, which essentially typical ARM template to deploy resources. Similarly, you have bicep template, so you can deploy bicep as well. You have this bicep, and then you have different resources in the bicep file. We'll talk about environment.yaml in a bit. And then similarly, we have a Terraform template, a single template, hello app, and there we have a Terraform file which deploys certain resources, and we'll talk about these resources in a bit. So this is nothing but catalog is. So catalog is, let me go back here. Yeah, so catalog is nothing, this, if we go here, so this is the part we are talking about. So platform catalog, here all your infrastructure templates are defined and stored here. And then in the deployment environment, Azure Deployment Environment, you mention this catalog as a dev center catalog. Now go back here, and then we have something called environment type. So in environment type is a kind of a type that you can define. So when you create a Azure Deployment Environment, and when you bind, let me go back again to the image. Yeah, so here you have environment type mapping. So you can create a type, and with that type you can bind subscriptions, identity, permissions, and secrets. So if you want to allow a developer to use one of the subscription only, so you create an environment type and tie that subscription with that environment type, and that's how we are doing here. So when we go here, let's have a look. So once we have created the environment type here, and the environment type name is sandbox. So if you go to the variable, the default value is here. So the default value for the environment type is sandbox. So that's what the sandbox will be created, and we will go to the portal in a bit. It has already deployed. So I'll look at these resources in the portal as well. But here to understand, first you need to create an environment type. Then you will create a project. So project is somewhere all the resources will be created, and we will see that there. And then how many environment you support per user, that's what we are defining here. And then we are defining couple of role assignments. So first role assignment is to the creator user role assignment. So creator user role assignment is nothing but you want to allow few users to create those sandbox environments. So let's go back here. So here, if you let's go here. So here this developer will need permissions to use these templates. And these permissions are essentially what we are defining over here, which is called user creator role assignment. And similarly, we have admin user role. So admin user role, like, someone who will be making sure what kind of environments are deployed. So it might be the same infrastructure team members, or it might be someone else who is supposed to manage the environment and something like that. So you can define that way. And we are defining these two different variables here. So we have two different user IDs. We are defining one user is creating the environment, and another user is administrator for that, for all those environment. And that's what the the thing happening there. Now we have this environment type. So we have already created an environment type name, and now what we are doing is, here we are assigning the permissions. So we have the identity, and we are assigning the permissions to that identity over here. So permissions. And similarly, we are also assigning the subscription to that environment type. So this is exactly this part where you map subscriptions, identities. Again, you can also map permissions, what kind of permissions this environment type will have, what kind of subscription where the resources will be deployed, and what kind of identities will be associated with this environment for accessing different resources, and so on and so forth. So this is what is happening here, over here. And then we have this different role assignments that is needed for the deployment environment to create resources. So it needs a contributor role so that it can deploy the resources, and it needs access to a key vault role, which is a reader role. So if you see, we are accessing in the data key vault reader role. So we have key vault reader. And what is this key vault? So key vault role is required for this part. Let me go there. If you see, we are mentioning a key vault URI here, and this key vault URI is containing a secret. Now this secret is GitHub pat token to access this repository. So if you see, this repository contains our template. So this repository contains our template, and now Azure Deployment Environment want to access this repository. It has to authenticate to this repository using that GitHub pat token, so that it can access this repository and fetch the templates and make it available to the users. Now let's have a look how exactly it looks like. So once we have defined all these things and then deployed, we have like 11 resources. And if we go to the portal, let me go to the portal and let me refresh. You can see that we have a dev center, sandbox dev center, and in that dev center we have a project named dev center demo project. And in the same place we have a catalog which is connected to this GitHub repository. And in this and this repository is nothing but the same place. So if I copy this and open this here, you'll see that it is the same part, same thing that is I have on my laptop. And here in this chapter 9, I have environment definition. In this environment definition, we have different templates, and these templates are essentially the individual deployment template, either written in Bicep or ARM or Terraform. Now, how those template looks like, we will get into that part in a bit. So this is how you deploy. And then if we go here in this environment sorry, not here. If you go to the dev center, and if you go to the project, and if you go to this project, you will see that this project is aligned to a subscription. And we have this environment type, and this environment type, we have an environment type called sandbox, which is connected with the subscription. So anything being deployed to this environment type will be deployed to this subscription. Now, how does this look like? Before that, let's have a look on this part. So we have looked into how to deploy a Azure Deployment Environment. So Azure Deployment Environment is, open this. Yeah. So this whole setup. So we have not yet deployed any resource. We have just, I mean, resource as in like as a developer. So far as a platform engineer, we have set up this whole framework. Now someone has to use this framework to deploy resources in Azure. So someone who wants to deploy a web app or container app or something that has been published as a IAC template. So how that person can do? So so first of all, that person has to have permissions to do that, and that's what we did when we assigned role over here. So when we assigned the environment creator role here to the user, that user coming from this variable, we assigned that user, and now that user is, let me go here and let me open in incognito mode by logging into that user. Now this when you deploy a deployment environment, you have access to something called Azure Developer Portal. I mean, or deployment environment developer portal. It is essentially a kind of a developer portal or internal developer portal for your organization, where developer can go and access a web interface through which they can create their own environment on demand. So let's have a look there. So developer dot Microsoft.com. So this is not this dev portal, sorry. So dev portal.microsoft. So as you can see, it says Microsoft Developer Portal. Here, if I log in, and if I log in with that user account, which has permissions to create the resources, yeah, okay, so let me log in here, and yep. So as you can see, I have options to create environment. I can see here option new environment, or I can click here. As soon as I click here, I have options to name this environment. I can name it anything I want, maybe test environment. And when I click on it, you can see that which project I have access to, what kind of sandbox, what kind of environment I can create. So this ensures that where these resources will be created. So if you remember, this sandbox environment type is tied to a subscription where the deployment will happen. So your developer might have different kind of needs, like they might want to deploy a environment in, let me open that, let me minimize this one. Yeah, so a developer might want to deploy a dev environment, which is a dev subscription. A developer might want to deploy a test environment, which can be a test subscription, and so on and so forth. So this environment type you have to define, and you have to map that environment type with subscriptions and relevant permissions, and that's how a developer can access those things from here, from the portal. And it's not just portal, a developer can even deploy these environments using Azure Developer CLI as well, and we will look into Azure Developer CLI in, maybe we have already covered sorry, we have already covered Azure Developer CLI in one of the previous session, but not with the Azure Deployment Environment. So what we will do is, as a next step, in the next session, we will demonstrate how you can combine these two tools together to deploy a platform, a kind of a set of resources for your application, right from a CLI or from an automated pipeline, for say. Okay, so here is that, and then you can select these environment definition, and as you can see, these all environment definition have the same kind of resources or same kind of templates you can see, or you can click here, see all the template, and you can see that these are the templates available to me through this catalog. And if you remember, this is the catalog that we have attached. And let me just go back here so that I can refresh the things for you. So okay, so as you can see here, we have this deployment environment. If you go to the project, sorry, here, and in the catalog, you see this is the catalog we are talking about. So this catalog, whatever the resources, whatever the definitions you have in this catalog, you know, eight things are there. Your developers can see those things over here. And in that, now let's have a look, you know, what's happening over there. And in the, so let's minimize this deployment environment. Now let's dig into this environment definition, which we can access from that developer portal. Now we will talk about Terraform because we are talking about everything happening through Terraform. You can even, I mean, the same concept goes with Bicep, same concept goes with ARM template, and even you can find those examples in the official documentation, but I could not find very helpful information in terms of Terraform. So that's why we will discuss about Terraform here. Now in the Terraform, we have only one application named Hello App. And in this particular, you know, folder, you can see we have something called environment.yaml. Forget about this log file. We don't need it. Environment.yaml, and then typical Terraform definition. So you have this Terraform definition, and as you can see, this Terraform definition, it's typical Terraform configuration for creating a container environment, a container app based on a image from this image repository. Now this can be more complex. Right now we are talking about very simple example, but it can be a container registry, internal container registry, and it can be a container registry hosting your application image, which is being developed and deployed by or hosted by your developer team. And I mean, you can define these things, or you can even parameterize it so that when your developer create applications. So for example, if I select this Hello App, and you know, I have this name, I have selected this, and then if I go to next, I have two different, I have options to select the repository, I have option to select the runtime, so I can parameterize it. So similarly, if I select this Hello App, then I have only one option to select, that is name of the container application. So you can parameterize it, like you can have a parameter for these image things, so that developer can select their own image, whatever repository they host, or you can further automate this part as well. Now this is the container application Terraform configuration. The special part about the Azure Deployment Environment is this file environment.yaml. So if you look at any of the definitions, so we have right now Hello App, but if you go to a Bicep and if you go to container app, you will see environment.yaml. Similarly, if you go to app config, there also you will see environment.yaml. So this environment.yaml actually defines the let me close this one and let me open the simple one. So yeah, this is the one that we have for Hello App, which is based on Terraform. So this YAML file is something that Azure Deployment Environment understand, and it understand that what runner you are using. So here runner is something, this is where the extensibility model comes into picture. Let me again go back to that image, and you can see that you have extensibility model where you can mention a container image through which your IAC template are compiled and deployed. So here you can, by default, Azure Deployment Environment supports not here, where is this? Yeah, supports Bicep and ARM template without having to have a container image. So if you go to one of the Bicep YAML, you can see you just have to mention Bicep, that's it, and then it has access to a container image from Microsoft where through which it can run this Bicep file. But if you have a Terraform, then you have to build this Terraform container. So I have already built it using a repository. I have this repository here. Let me open this. GitHub. So, oops. And let me, repository, where is the repository? Yeah. So this is the repository I have used, essentially coming directly from Microsoft documentation, and through which I have an action which builds and pushes the image to the image repository, which I already have. Now you can further automate this part as well, and we have this repository which contains the runner image. So here you have to use a repository of yourself, Azure Container Registry yourself, where you should have an image that has to have defined in a particular way for making sure it works with the Azure Deployment Environment. Now this can be bicep or this can be ARM template. For them, you don't have to have a kind of a container registry or something like that. It can be just as simple as that, mentioning bicep, or if I go to ARM, sandbox, just ARM, simple. Okay, so we have this environment definition for Terraform, and then you have to define the parameter, what kind of parameter your Terraform file expects. So if you go to our Terraform, we have this main file and we have a variable file. Now in the variable, we have just one variable, which is container app name. And that's the reason we have a parameter defined here that a user can define a container app name. Okay. Now, where is the path of the template? So where exactly the template is like, it can be within a folder or it can be in the root. So in our case, it is in the root and the name is main.tf. So we have this main.tf, and then we have just a simple description, summary, and the name. This is used to show the template definition to you. So if you go here, cancel, and if you click on name, so if you go here on the all definition, you have to show the name. So we have the name, we have the description. So we have the description. This is completely coming through that YAML file. So if I select this hello app, and if I go here and name it my hello app, and if I go to next, and it is taking up default name. So if Terraform, if that YAML file has a default name, as you can see, there is a default, it will pick up, or you can change it and you can define your own Ashish hello app. Yeah. And then if you click on create, then this is what we are talking about, that you don't need a portal access. You don't have to see how those infrastructure as code files are defined. You don't have to know any of it, and you will have this resource being created there, and then based on the permissions that has been defined for you, you will have access to those resources. But essentially you have a on-demand definition, on-demand environment created for you in a particular subscription with particular permissions and all. Now let's have a look how it looks like in the portal. So if we go to the portal, let me minimize this. Yeah. And if we go to this project, yeah, and in this, if we go to the environments, you will see that an environment is being created, and you can see that we have our resource group being created. It is being managed and created by the Azure Deployment Environment itself. I don't have to worry about how this being created as a developer. I just have to worry about the resources. It's still deploying. It will soon deploy those resources in a bit. So it's working behind the scene, and even it will give access, give me URL to access those resources in Azure portal as well, provided platform engineers are allowing me to do that. I mean, they can define in the environment, Azure deployment environment, how they want to have, how much access they want to have for the user who is creating the environment, read access, contributor access, whatever they want to define. Okay, so let's go back again and let's refresh it. Yeah, it's still creating. So it will take some time because it is creating a Azure container environment, and then it is deploying a resource. I mean, Azure container app. It will take some time. Okay, so this is how you can create. Now, right now we have demonstrated, for simplicity, we have demonstrated this through developer portal, which is one of the easiest option that you can offer to your developers. They can easily create those sandbox environments. They can easily deploy resources in the Azure as and when they want. But for more automation, because as your team grows, as you handle more development teams, you need more automation, and that's where you can have Azure Developer CLI. So Azure Developer CLI is a CLI tool for developers. They can use Azure Developer CLI to deploy resources in Azure without worrying about infrastructure definitions that can be developed by the infrastructure platform engineers, based on the same concept that we just discussed about. Let me go back here. Yeah, so your developers can, your platform engineers can keep on developing the infrastructure as code catalog, and your developers, initially they can use developer portal just like I did. So as soon as they are familiar with the concept, and they are familiar with the environment, and they are familiar with the approach, they can switch to the CLI for more scalable and automated approach. And further, they can kind of create their own CI/CD pipeline to make use of these infrastructure as code templates on demand to deploy resources in Azure. So this is the kind of platform engineering or internal developer portal experience being offered by Azure Deployment Environment. Now let's have a look. It's still creating. Let me go to the Azure now and let's see. Sometime it creates the resource, but show after some time. Environments. Yeah, it's still provisioning. And if you go here, yep, you can see the resources are deployed, still kind of working out to finish the things. But if I go here, then you can see I have a URL. I can open this URL and I have the hello world image. And this is how you can deploy resources in Azure using Azure Deployment Environment, following the platform engineering or internal developer platform or internal developer portal, whatever you want to say, approach. We can further, as I said, extend it to using Azure Developer CLI or CI/CD pipeline and keep it more automated, more of like code build debug, more kind of circular approach where you don't do things using portal, but rather than use CLI or CI/CD pipeline to automate the deployment in respective environments, and that you can choose. Okay, so this is all I had today. Let me just have a look. Yep, it's still working. Let's wait for some time. Actually, it has deployed, but it is just finishing up. Yep, so you can see it is able to give us the environment has created, and as you can see, I have access to environment resources. So if I click here, it will open the portal and directly land to the resource group where all my resources are deployed. And based on the permissions that has been defined for this environment, I will gain those permissions for these resources, and then I can make changes or whatever I want to do. And then later on, once I'm done, I can even go ahead and either redeploy or delete this whole environment without worrying about, without having to contact with the infrastructure team. So it is a kind of a sandbox environment for me. I deployed it, I tested it, my application is working. Now I just got it deleted. So this is how you can use Azure Deployment Environment using an internal developer portal approach, or you can say platform engineering. And then you can further extend it using Azure Developer CLI or using CI/CD pipeline. So that's what we will do in the next video maybe. And as you know, this is part of my book as well. So this is just the starting. We will extend this in my book where we will deploy this in a more automated way. We will have a little bit of more complex use case where we will deploy our own application as well, not just hello world. We will deploy an application in a more automated fashion using CLI, and kind of giving more complex or near to real world example of internal developer platform. So yeah, this is it. Thanks for watching.